On the sprawling campus of Hillcrest University, three young women ruled the scene: Emily, Sarah, and Jessica. Known for their wealth, beauty, and sharp tongues, they walked through the halls like they owned the place, their every step followed by whispers and stolen glances. To the casual observer, they were perfect, everything a university student could aspire to be. But to those who knew them, or had the misfortune of being in their crosshairs, they were a nightmare. It wasn't that they were mean for no reason. They had plenty of reasons. Emily, the queen bee, came from a family whose name was etched into the very foundations of the university. Her father was an influential alumnus, her mother a celebrated philanthropist. She had been raised to believe she was special, destined for greatness. Jessica, her loyal second-in-command, wasn't far behind. Her father was a senator, and her life had always been a blur of exclusive country clubs, private schools, and polished manners that could turn cold in an instant. Sarah, the third in the trio, was the quietest, but just as ruthless. Her silence wasn't shyness. It was the mask of a girl who knew how to strike at the right moment. Together, they dominated Hillcrest. No one dared cross them, and few could resist trying to befriend them. Those who tried and failed were cast aside as if they never existed. Then came Kate. She was different from their usual targets, unassuming, with her head buried in books and her feet firmly on the ground. Kate wasn't from their world of wealth and status. Her clothes were plain, her friends few but genuine. But she had something the trio hated most: self-assurance. It started small, as these things often do. Emily had spotted Kate in the library, sitting alone with her notes spread out across the table, lost in study. For some reason, it irritated Emily. She didn't understand how someone could be so content, so unaffected by the world around them. Kate's obliviousness to the social hierarchy annoyed her. So, Emily leaned over to Sarah and Jessica, a wicked smile curling her lips. "Let's have a little fun." The plan was simple: humiliate Kate in front of everyone. She wasn't their first victim, and she wouldn't be the last. But Emily underestimated her. It happened in the cafeteria 2 days later. The trio walked in, as they always did, all eyes following them as they glided to the center of the room. Kate was sitting at one of the long tables, eating alone. Emily's gaze locked onto her, and she led her friends straight to Kate's table. "Hey," Emily said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Kate looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she could sense the trap before it was even set. "Can we sit?" Emily didn't wait for an answer, taking a seat directly across from Kate, Jessica, and Sarah, flanking her on either side. The cafeteria had grown quieter, people pretending not to watch but failing miserably. Kate set down her fork slowly. "Do you need something?" Emily smirked. "Just thought we'd join you. It looked like you could use some company." Kate's expression didn't change. She didn't cower, didn't shrink like so many others had done before her. Instead, she met Emily's gaze head-on. "I'm fine," Kate said calmly, glancing down at her book again. "You can go." The challenge in her words was subtle but unmistakable. Emily's smirk faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Ah, don't be like that," Emily cooed, her voice falsely innocent. "We just wanted to get to know you. You don't seem to hang out with many people, do you?" Jessica and Sarah snickered on cue, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. But Kate wasn't intimidated. "I'm not here to entertain you," Kate said simply. "So, if that's what you're after, you're wasting your time." The air around the table shifted. No one had ever spoken to Emily like that, let alone dismissed her so casually. For a brief moment, there was stunned silence. Then, a flicker of something dangerous passed through Emily's eyes. "Well," she said, standing abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We'll see about that." Kate watched as the trio left, feeling the eyes of the entire cafeteria on her. She didn't care. She wasn't about to play their game, no matter how powerful they thought they were. But as she gathered her things to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Emily and her friends didn't take kindly to being challenged, and they definitely didn't take no for an answer. Kate had no idea just how far they were willing to go. Over the next few days, the tension between Kate and the trio grew. Emily, Sarah, and Jessica were not used to being ignored, much less dismissed. Kate's refusal to play along had only stoked their anger. They began to talk about her more openly, making cruel jokes just within earshot. In class, they would whisper behind her back, loud enough for her to hear, but never directly to her face. It wasn't long before their torment became more than just words. Kate was in the library again, absorbed in her studies, when it happened. A loud thud startled her. A heavy textbook had been dropped on the table in front of her, just missing her hand. She looked up, startled, to find Jessica and Sarah standing over her, grinning. "Oh, sorry," Sarah said, her voice thick with mock innocence. "Didn't see you there." Kate's heart raced, but she didn't show it. She met their eyes calmly, saying nothing, before returning to her notes. Sarah and Jessica exchanged glances, clearly irritated by her indifference. "You've got quite the attitude, don't you?" Jessica sneered. "You think you're better than us?" Kate sighed, closing her notebook with a soft snap. She looked up at them again, her voice steady. "I think I have better things to do than deal with your childish games." Jessica's face twisted with anger, but before she could say anything, Emily appeared behind her. She placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder, stopping her. "That's enough," Emily said, her voice low but authoritative. Jessica immediately backed off, though she still shot Kate a venomous glare. Emily stepped forward, her eyes locked on Kate's. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Emily said softly, almost too softly. "You could just play along, you know? Things would go a lot easier for you." Kate tilted her head, studying Emily for a moment. There was something chilling in Emily's calmness, the way she spoke as if she were offering Kate a deal. But Kate had no interest in bargaining with her. "I'm not interested," Kate said, her voice unwavering. Emily's eyes darkened. "You should be," she replied, her voice carrying a dangerous edge now. "You have no idea what you're up against." Kate didn't flinch. She knew Emily was used to getting her way, used to people bending to her will. But Kate wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. "You can't scare me," Kate said quietly, but firmly. For a moment, Emily just stared at her, as if deciding whether to escalate things. Then, a slow smile spread across her lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a predator wore right before the kill. "We'll see," Emily said, turning on her heel and walking away, Sarah and Jessica following close behind. As they left, the atmosphere in the library seemed to relax, but Kate's tension remained. She knew they weren't done. Emily wouldn't back down easily. Later that evening, as Kate walked across campus, the shadows seemed longer, the air heavier. The pathways that usually felt safe now felt like they were filled with eyes watching her, waiting. She couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. She quickened her pace, heading toward the dorms, but the sense of unease grew with every step. And then she heard it, a laugh, high-pitched and familiar. Turning, she saw them. Emily, Jessica, and Sarah, standing near the fountain, half hidden by the trees. They weren't following her, not yet, but their presence was enough to set Kate's nerves on edge. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to confront them or keep walking. But before she could decide, Emily called out, her voice cutting through the night air like a knife. "Running away, Kate? Thought you were tougher than that." Kate stopped, her fists clenching at her sides. She turned slowly to face them, refusing to show any fear. The three girls strolled toward her, casually, as if they had all the time in the world. Emily led the way, her smile wide, too wide. "You don't really understand how things work around here, do you?" Emily said, stopping just a few feet away from Kate. Sarah and Jessica flanked her, grinning like wolves. "I understand just fine," Kate replied, her voice steady. "I'm just not interested in being part of your little game." Emily's smile faltered for the briefest of moments before she regained her composure. "See, that's where you're wrong. This isn't a game, Kate. This is reality. And in reality, people like us," she gestured between herself, Sarah, and Jessica. "We make the rules. People like you, you just follow them." Kate met Emily's gaze with unwavering defiance. "You don't make the rules for me." Emily's eyes narrowed. "You really don't get it, do you? It's not about what you want. It's about what we can do. We can make your life miserable, Kate. You'll have no friends, no one to turn to, You'll be alone. Kate raised her chin. I've been alone before. I can handle it. The honesty in her voice seemed to catch Emily off guard. For a second, there was silence, the tension between them thick enough to cut. Then Emily laughed, a sharp, cold sound. We'll see, she said, her voice full of promise. Without another word, Emily turned and walked away, Sarah and Jessica following. Kate stood there, watching them disappear into the darkness. Her pulse was racing, but she felt strangely calm. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But Kate wasn't afraid. Whatever they had planned, she would face it head-on. The next morning, Kate arrived at Hillcrest University feeling a strange sense of anticipation. She had spent most of the night tossing and turning, replaying the confrontation with Emily, Jessica, and Sarah in her mind. She wasn't afraid, not really, but she knew she had to stay on her guard. The trio wasn't done with her, and she didn't expect them to stop after a few cold words. As she walked through the main courtyard, Kate could feel eyes on her. People were whispering, glancing her way, some with curiosity, others with pity. It didn't take long for her to figure out why. On the walls, near the entrance of the library, a series of posters had been plastered up. Kate's face, blown up in black and white, was on every single one. Above her image were the words, "Who does she think she is?" Kate stopped in her tracks, staring at the posters. There were at least 10 of them, scattered across the building's entrance and on nearby trees. People were walking by, some laughing, others giving her sympathetic looks. It was meant to humiliate her, to make her feel small, but instead, it just made her angry. She ripped one of the posters down, crumpling it in her fist. The image was grainy, as if it had been taken secretly, without her knowledge. It was probably from the day in the cafeteria, she realized. Emily must have orchestrated the whole thing. "Kate," a voice called out, and she turned to see her friend, Ethan, jogging toward her. He was one of the few people she had trusted since arriving at Hillcrest, a down-to-earth guy who didn't care about the social politics that ruled the campus. "Did you see this?" Ethan asked, breathless, holding one of the posters in his hand. His face was a mix of concern and anger. "This is messed up. Who did this?" Kate sighed, dropping the crumpled paper to the ground. "Emily. It's her way of telling me she's in control." Ethan frowned, his eyes scanning the posters around them. "She really thinks this is going to work?" "What?" A few pictures and a snarky comment. "She thinks it'll get to me," Kate said, her voice steady. "She wants me to back down." Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. "Are you going to?" Kate shook her head. "No, I'm not letting them win." Ethan nodded, but there was a tension in his jaw. "We should report this, Kate. This is harassment. The administration can't just let them get away with it." Kate hesitated. "They can, and they probably will. You know how this place works. Emily's family has too much influence. If I report it, it'll just make things worse." "But you can't just do nothing," Ethan argued, frustration creeping into his voice. "You can't let her keep pushing you like this." Kate stared at the posters again, feeling the weight of the situation. "I'm not going to let her push me, but I have to be smart about it. Going to the administration won't solve anything." Ethan was about to argue further when another voice interrupted them. "Nice artwork, huh?" They both turned to see Emily standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. Jessica and Sarah stood behind her, smirking like they were in on some private joke. "Impressive, right?" Emily said, her tone light and mocking. "Thought it might add a little something to the campus atmosphere." Ethan took a step forward, his fists clenched. "You think this is funny? You're pathetic, Emily." Emily's smile didn't waver. She glanced at Ethan briefly before turning her full attention back to Kate. "Isn't he cute, Kate? So protective. You should keep him around. He might be useful." Kate stepped forward, cutting off Ethan before he could say anything more. "What do you want, Emily?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Emily's eyes flickered with something. Irritation, perhaps, at Kate's unshaken demeanor. "What I want is for you to understand your place, Kate. You don't belong here. You're just another nobody trying to play in a world you don't understand." Kate didn't flinch. "I understand more than you think. And if this is the best you've got, She gestured to the posters. Then you're wasting your time. For the first time, Emily's smile faltered. There was a flash of anger in her eyes, a frustration that she couldn't fully mask. You're making a mistake, Emily said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. People like you don't last here, and I'll make sure of it. Kate's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. Do what you need to do, Emily. But I'm not going anywhere. Emily stared at her for a long moment, her jaw clenched, as if she was weighing her next move. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, Sarah and Jessica trailing behind her. Ethan exhaled loudly, his hands still balled into fists. I can't believe her. She's completely lost it. She's used to getting her way, Kate said quietly. She doesn't know how to deal with someone standing up to her. Ethan looked at her, his expression softening again. You're stronger than I thought, Kate. But it's going to get worse. Kate nodded, already knowing it was true. Yeah, but I'm ready. They spent the rest of the morning taking down the posters, but even as the last one was ripped from the wall, Kate knew it was just the beginning. Emily wasn't done, not by a long shot, and Kate wasn't sure how far she'd go to get what she wanted. A few days later, Kate could feel the shift. It was subtle at first, hushed conversations that seemed to stop the moment she walked into a room, side glances from people she had never even spoken to, and whispers that followed her wherever she went. She wasn't surprised. Emily had a way of spreading rumors like wildfire, and it was clear that the campaign against her was just getting started. By the time Kate sat down in her sociology class that afternoon, she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her. She pretended not to notice, keeping her focus on her notebook as the professor droned on about social structures and hierarchies. Ironically, it was a topic she was living firsthand. Halfway through the lecture, her phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. Kate hesitated before discreetly sliding it out. She glanced at the screen, expecting it to be Ethan or one of her other friends. But her heart sank when she saw the message from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. You're not safe here. Leave now while you still can. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced around the room, wondering if someone in there had sent it. No one was looking at her anymore. Everyone seemed engrossed in the lecture or their laptops. But that only made her more uneasy. Whoever was behind this was watching her from somewhere, and they clearly wanted her to feel vulnerable. She clenched her jaw, refusing to give in to the fear that was bubbling up inside her. Emily was behind this, there was no doubt. She must have gotten someone else involved, someone who was willing to take things to a more personal, threatening level. The rest of the class passed in a blur, Kate barely able to concentrate as the message replayed in her mind over and over again. When the bell finally rang, she quickly gathered her things and left the classroom, her heart pounding. As she walked down the corridor, she kept her phone in her hand, her thumb hovering over the screen in case another message came through. She wasn't going to run. Not yet. But this had officially gone too far. Later that evening, as she sat in her dorm room, the uneasy feeling still gnawed at her. She had locked the door and pulled the curtains shut, but it didn't stop her from feeling exposed. She stared at her phone for a long time before finally deciding to text Ethan. I got a weird message today. Can we talk? A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a reply. I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there. It wasn't long before there was a knock on her door. Kate opened it to find Ethan standing there, his brow furrowed in concern. He stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind him. What happened? He asked, sitting down at her desk while she sat on the edge of her bed. Kate showed him the message, and his face darkened as he read it. This is serious, Kate. This isn't just some prank. Whoever sent this is trying to scare you. I know, Kate said, her voice tight, but it's not going to work. I'm not leaving. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. I get that, but you can't just ignore this. What if they're serious? Kate shook her head. This is Emily's doing. She's trying to push me out, make me feel like I don't belong here. I'm not going to give her the satisfaction. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. What if it's not just her? What if someone else is involved? You said it yourself. This feels personal. Kate bit her lip, her mind racing. It was true that the message felt different from Emily's usual tactics. It was darker, more threatening, but she still believed it was connected to her. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I can't let her scare me into leaving. If I do that, she wins." Ethan sighed, leaning back in the chair. "So, what's the plan? You can't just sit here and wait for whatever they've got planned next." Kate exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "I need to figure out who's sending these messages. I have to get ahead of this before it escalates." Ethan nodded. "All right, we'll figure it out. But you're not dealing with this alone, okay?" Kate gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thanks, Ethan." For the next hour, they brainstormed, trying to think of ways to track down who was behind the messages. They discussed talking to the administration, even though they knew it might be a dead end. Emily's family connections would make it hard to get any real help from the school, but they also couldn't sit back and wait for the next move. Just as they were wrapping up their conversation, Kate's phone buzzed again. Both of them froze. Another message from the same unknown number. "You've been warned. Don't push your luck." Ethan cursed under his breath. "That's it. We're going to the administration tomorrow. I don't care how connected Emily is. This can't continue." Kate nodded, her stomach twisting in knots. "Yeah, tomorrow." But even as she agreed, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The next morning, Kate and Ethan walked to the administration office together. It was early, and the campus was quiet, the stillness only adding to the sense of dread Kate felt building inside her. She clutched her phone tightly in her hand, the two messages still glaring at her from the screen. When they arrived at the office, they were told to wait. After a few minutes, they were called into the office of Dean Harrison, the head of student affairs. The room was large and neatly organized, with a massive oak desk in the center and floor-to-ceiling windows behind it. The dean looked up from her paperwork as they entered, a polite smile on her face. "How can I help you too?" Kate exchanged a glance with Ethan before stepping forward. "I've been receiving threatening messages," she said, holding up her phone. "I think it's connected to some bullying that's been going on." Dean Harrison's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. She gestured for them to sit, and Kate handed over her phone for the dean to see the messages. "This is very serious," the dean said, her voice grave as she read the texts. "Do you have any idea who might be behind this?" Kate hesitated, her pulse quickening. "I think Emily Rogers might be involved." The dean's expression shifted slightly, her brows furrowing. "Emily Rogers? Are you sure?" Kate nodded, even as doubt started to creep in. "She's been targeting me for weeks. This all started after I stood up to her." Dean Harrison was quiet for a moment, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "Emily's family is well known here, as I'm sure you're aware. Accusations like this can have significant consequences." Kate swallowed hard. "I know, but I'm not making this up. I'm not the only one she's gone after." The dean sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I'll look into it, but I have to tell you, this kind of investigation can take time. If there's no concrete evidence linking her to the messages, there may not be much we can do." Kate's heart sank. She had known this was a possibility, but hearing it out loud made it feel even more hopeless. "We'll still investigate," the dean added quickly. "In the meantime, if you feel unsafe, I urge you to come to us immediately." Kate forced a nod, though inside, she felt a deep sense of frustration. It was clear that nothing was going to happen quickly. Emily would continue to get away with it, at least for now. As they left the office, Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out, Kate. Don't lose hope." But hope was exactly what she was starting to lose. Enjoying the video? Subscribe to our channel to receive more interesting content. Click the subscribe button and stay updated with the latest news. That evening, Kate sat alone in her dorm room, staring blankly at the wall. The conversation with Dean Harrison had left her feeling drained and powerless. She had known the administration wouldn't be able to take immediate action, but the weight of the situation pressed down on her harder than ever. Emily and her influence seemed untouchable. Her phone buzzed again, jolting her out of her thoughts. She tensed, expecting another message from the unknown number. But when she looked at the screen, she was surprised to see it was a message from her mother. "How's everything going? Miss you. Call me when you can." Kate sighed, staring at the words for a moment before setting the phone aside. She couldn't tell her mom about any of this. Not yet. The last thing she needed was for her parents to worry. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She got up slowly, her heart picking up pace as she crossed the room. Opening the door, she found Ethan standing there, his face serious. "Hey," he said quietly. "I thought you might want some company." Kate stepped aside, letting him in. "Thanks. I could use it." Ethan sat down on the bed while Kate slumped into the desk chair. They didn't say anything for a few moments, the silence heavy between them. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I've been thinking about it all day. The administration isn't going to do anything unless we can prove it's Emily behind those messages." Kate rubbed her temples. "Yeah, and even then, they'll probably just give her a slap on the wrist." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "But what if we catch her in the act?" Kate raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He looked up at her, a glint of determination in his eyes. "We set a trap. Get her to admit it, or at least make a mistake." Kate shook her head, doubt clouding her thoughts. "And how do we do that? Emily's smart. She's careful." "We get under her skin," Ethan said. "She's not as composed as she thinks. We just need to push her enough that she slips up." Kate bit her lip, considering the idea. It was risky. Emily wasn't the kind of person who cracked under pressure easily. But at this point, Kate didn't see many other options. "What if it backfires?" she asked quietly. "What if she just doubles down and makes things worse?" Ethan met her gaze, his voice steady. "Then we deal with it. But we can't let her keep doing this to you. To anyone." Kate exhaled slowly, her mind racing through the possibilities. The thought of pushing Emily into a corner, forcing her to reveal her true colors, was tempting. It felt dangerous, but maybe that was what they needed. A way to turn the tables. "All right," she said, nodding slowly. "Let's do it." Ethan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "We'll figure out the details tomorrow. I've got a few ideas, but we need to be careful." Kate appreciated his caution. As much as she wanted to take action, she knew they couldn't afford to rush this. The next day, Kate and Ethan laid the groundwork for their plan. They decided to take advantage of the fact that Emily thrived on her reputation and control over others. If they could find a way to make her feel threatened, like she was losing that control, there was a chance she might lash out. And when she did, they'd be ready. It started small. Kate began sitting closer to groups of students who were known to dislike Emily. She spoke up more in class, drawing attention to herself in ways that Emily would notice but couldn't easily retaliate against. She made it clear, through subtle actions and words, that she wasn't backing down. Within a few days, the tension between them was palpable. Emily watched Kate's every move, her eyes following her like a hawk. Kate could feel the pressure building, and it was only a matter of time before Emily cracked. The opportunity came one afternoon when Kate was sitting with Ethan in the courtyard. They were pretending to study, but both of them were alert, waiting for Emily to make her move. And she did. Emily, flanked by Jessica and Sarah, approached their table, her expression dark. There was no smile this time, no pretense of friendliness. She was done playing games. "Kate," Emily said, her voice cold, "can we talk?" Kate didn't look up from her book. "I'm busy." Emily's jaw tightened. "Now." Ethan shot Kate a look, silently asking if she was ready. Kate nodded subtly and closed her book, standing up slowly. She turned to face Emily, feeling the weight of the moment. "Fine," Kate said. "Let's talk." They moved away from the crowded courtyard to a quieter spot near the edge of the campus, where fewer people could overhear them. Ethan stayed behind, watching closely from a distance. Emily crossed her arms, her eyes blazing with barely concealed anger. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she spat. "Trying to turn people against me? You have no idea what you're getting into." Kate didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to turn anyone against you, Emily. I'm just done letting you control everything." Emily's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Control? Is that what you think this is about? You don't belong here, Kate. You never have." Kate stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I belong here just as much as you do. You can't scare me into leaving." For a moment, Emily just stared at her, the rage simmering beneath the surface. Then, without warning, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "If you don't back down, I'll ruin you," Emily said, her words dripping with venom. "You think I've been hard on you so far? This is nothing. I can make your life a living hell." Kate's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "Do whatever you need to do, Emily. But I'm not afraid of you." Emily's eyes narrowed, and for a second, Kate saw something flicker in her expression. Something like doubt, maybe even fear. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "You're going to regret this," Emily whispered before turning on her heel and walking away, Jessica and Sarah trailing behind her. Kate stood there for a moment, her hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline coursed through her. She had done it. She had faced Emily head-on, and though the threat still loomed large, Kate felt a sense of triumph she hadn't felt before. Ethan hurried over to her, his eyes wide. "Are you okay?" Kate nodded, exhaling slowly. "Yeah, I'm okay." But deep down, she knew this was far from over. Emily wasn't bluffing, and whatever came next, it was going to be worse. The following week, things escalated faster than Kate could have anticipated. It started small, just like before. Whispers that seemed louder, glares that felt more menacing. But it wasn't long before the pranks became something more dangerous. On Monday, Kate found her dorm room door slightly ajar when she returned from class. Her heart leapt into her throat as she hesitated outside the door. She knew she had locked it before leaving, but now it stood open, like an invitation into something darker. Slowly, she pushed it open and stepped inside. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Her books were still stacked on her desk, her bed neatly made. But then she noticed something strange. Her laptop screen was on, displaying a blank white screen, even though she was certain she'd turned it off that morning. Unease crawled up her spine as she approached the desk. When she touched the keyboard, the white screen disappeared, revealing a single message typed out across the middle of the screen in large, bold letters. "I warned you." Kate's stomach dropped. She felt the room spin slightly as she realized that someone had been inside. They had been in her space, touched her things, and left this message for her to find. Her hands trembled as she quickly shut the laptop, trying to gather her thoughts. She didn't need to guess who was behind this. It was Emily. This was her way of showing that she could reach Kate wherever she wanted, whenever she wanted. Kate didn't waste any time. She grabbed her phone and called Ethan. The moment he answered, she said, "Someone was in my room." "What? Are you okay?" Ethan's voice was filled with alarm. "Yeah, but they left a message on my laptop. I warned you." "Ethan, they broke in. I'm coming over. Don't touch anything." 15 minutes later, Ethan arrived, his face a mask of concern. He immediately scanned the room, checking to see if anything else had been disturbed. But nothing seemed to be missing or broken. It was as if the intruder had only come to deliver the message. "Kate, this is serious. You need to report this. Breaking into your dorm is a whole other level." Kate crossed her arms, hugging herself. "And tell them what? That Emily's behind it? I don't have any proof." Ethan looked at her, his frustration evident. "You can't keep letting her do this to you. We have to do something." Kate knew he was right. This was beyond petty bullying now. This was a direct threat, and if she didn't do something, Emily would only take it further. But Kate also knew how powerful Emily's family was, how much influence they held at Hillcrest. Even with something as serious as this, the administration might turn a blind eye. Still, they couldn't just sit back and wait for the next move. "We'll report it," Kate said, finally, "but we need to be smart about it. We have to gather more evidence." Ethan nodded, though his jaw remained tight. "All right, we'll be careful, but we can't let her think she's getting away with this." The next day, Kate filed a report with campus security. They took her statement and promised to look into it, but she could see the skepticism in their eyes. There was no forced entry, no witnesses. To them, it probably seemed like a prank or a misunderstanding. Still, Kate left feeling slightly better knowing that, at the very least, there was a record of the incident. But Emily wasn't done. A few days later, Kate was walking across campus, heading back to her dorm after a long day of classes. It was late, the sun already setting, casting long shadows over the courtyard. As she made her way down the path, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. Her steps quickened, her heart pounding as she glanced over her shoulder. The pathway was empty, but the unease remained. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping in front of her. It was Emily. Kate stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. Emily stood there, her arms crossed, a smug smile playing on her lips. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at Kate with a look that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. "What do you want, Emily?" Kate asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Emily's smile widened. "I told you, Kate, you don't belong here." Kate's eyes narrowed. "You broke into my room." Emily shrugged, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "You should have listened when I warned you." Kate clenched her fists. "You can't keep doing this. I reported you to campus security." At that, Emily's smile faltered, just for a second. But then she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "And what do you think that's going to do? You think they're going to side with you? Against me?" Kate's pulse quickened. She knew Emily was right. As long as Emily's family had their hold over Hillcrest, nothing was going to change. Emily took a step closer, her voice dropping to a low whisper. "I could ruin you, Kate. I could make you disappear from this place without a trace. Is that what you want?" Kate swallowed hard, refusing to let her fear show. "You're not going to scare me away, Emily." For a moment, they stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, without another word, Emily turned and walked away, disappearing back into the shadows from which she had come. Kate stood there, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She knew now that Emily wouldn't stop until she was satisfied. And as much as Kate hated to admit it, she was starting to wonder if she had underestimated just how far Emily was willing to go. Later that night, as she sat in her dorm room, Kate replayed the conversation in her head. Emily's words echoed in her mind. "I could make you disappear." The more Kate thought about it, the more she realized how dangerous the situation had become. Emily wasn't just trying to scare her anymore. She was threatening her. And Kate wasn't sure how much longer she could hold out before something truly bad happened. She needed a new plan. She needed to fight back, but smarter this time. Grabbing her phone, she dialed Ethan's number. "We need to take this to the next level," she said as soon as he answered. Ethan didn't hesitate. "What's the plan?" Kate's eyes hardened with determination. "We expose her. For real this time." The following day, Kate and Ethan sat together in the campus cafe, their heads bent close as they planned their next move. The air around them buzzed with the usual hum of conversations, but their focus was razor-sharp. They knew what they had to do, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. "We need something concrete," Ethan said, stirring his coffee absently. "Something that ties her directly to the threats. Otherwise, no one's going to believe us." Kate nodded, her mind racing. "She's too careful. She never leaves a trace. But if we can push her, get her to say something, slip up, we'll have what we need." Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've been thinking. We could set a trap, get her talking in a way she doesn't realize is being recorded." Kate's eyes widened slightly. "You mean wear a wire?" Ethan nodded. "Exactly. We catch her admitting what she's done, maybe even confessing to the break-in." Kate hesitated, biting her lip. What if she doesn't fall for it? What if she gets suspicious? Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering it. "It's a risk, but it's better than waiting around for her to escalate again. If we do nothing, she's going to keep pushing you until something worse happens." Kate finished for him, her voice grim. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision settling between them. Kate knew Ethan was right. If they didn't act now, Emily would only continue to tighten her grip, and the next step could be something far more dangerous. "All right," Kate said, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in her chest. "Let's do it." They spent the next few days putting their plan into motion. Ethan had a small recorder, a discreet device that could easily be hidden under Kate's jacket. They practiced how to steer the conversation, how to push Emily just enough without making her suspicious. It was risky, but it was their best shot. The day of the confrontation came faster than Kate expected. She felt a knot of nerves twisting in her stomach as she walked across campus, her eyes scanning the familiar surroundings, hyper-aware of every movement around her. Ethan had stayed behind, waiting at a distance, ready to back her up if things went south. She spotted Emily near the library, leaning casually against a tree, talking to Jessica and Sarah. They didn't notice her at first, too caught up in whatever conversation they were having. But as Kate approached, Emily's eyes flicked up and met hers. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. Kate's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to keep walking, her steps steady. She had to make this look natural. If Emily suspected anything, the whole plan would fall apart. "Look who it is," Emily said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The brave little warrior." Jessica and Sarah laughed, but Kate didn't let it get to her. She stopped in front of them, crossing her arms. "We need to talk, Emily," Kate said, her voice firm. Emily raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. "Oh, finally ready to admit you're in over your head?" Kate ignored the taunt. "Alone." Emily glanced at Jessica and Sarah, who both looked reluctant to leave, but a small nod from Emily sent them away. When they were out of earshot, Emily turned back to Kate, her expression curious but still mocking. "All right, I'm listening," Emily said, crossing her arms as if she had all the power in the world. Kate took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. The recorder under her jacket felt heavy, pressing against her chest. "You've been threatening me for weeks. The break-in, the messages, what's your endgame here?" Emily's smile didn't falter. "Endgame? Oh, Kate, this isn't a game. This is just me reminding you where you belong." Kate held her gaze. "And breaking into my room? Threatening me? That's part of it." Emily's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "You really don't get it, do you? You don't belong here. People like me, we make the rules. People like you, you're just here to play by them." Kate felt her pulse quicken. She needed more. She had to push her harder. "You're not going to get away with this, Emily. I've reported you. Campus security is already looking into it." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Emily's face, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by her usual arrogance. "You think anyone's going to believe you? You think they'll take your word over mine?" Kate stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "I have proof." Emily's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "You left a message on my laptop," Kate said, watching Emily's reaction closely. "You think that doesn't leave a trace? There's more than one way to track what you've been doing." Emily's face hardened. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Kate challenged, her heart racing. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not backing down. So you have two options. You can stop this right now, or you can keep pushing until you get caught. Because you will, Emily." For a long moment, Emily said nothing. Her eyes flicked over Kate, studying her, as if trying to decide whether or not to believe her. Then, without warning, Emily's expression twisted into a snarl. "You think you're so clever," she spat, her voice low and vicious. "You think you can outsmart me?" Kate stood her ground. "I think I've already outsmarted you." Emily took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I've ruined people for less than this, Kate. You think you're safe? You're not. I could make you disappear, and no one would even blink." Kate's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't let it show. This was what she needed. Emily was unraveling, and her words were all the proof Kate needed. "I'm not afraid of you," Kate said quietly. "Not anymore." Emily stared at her, her chest heaving with barely contained fury. But then, something shifted in her expression. A look of realization. She glanced around, as if suddenly aware that they weren't completely alone. The campus was quiet, but there were still students milling about in the distance. If she made a scene, people would notice. Emily straightened, forcing a tight, bitter smile onto her face. "You've made a mistake, Kate. A big one." Without another word, she turned and walked away, her steps quick and angry. Kate stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, trying to process what had just happened. She waited a few moments before reaching under her jacket and turning off the recorder. She had done it. She had caught Emily threatening her, admitting everything. But as she stood there, watching Emily's retreating figure, a cold realization crept in. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Emily wasn't going to stop. Not until one of them was gone. The next day, the campus was in uproar. The recording had spread beyond Hillcrest University, reaching local news outlets and social media platforms across the state. The hashtags #ExposedEmily and #HillcrestScandal were trending, and everyone seemed to have an opinion on the story. Some students praised Kate's courage, while others couldn't believe that someone as untouchable as Emily Rogers could be brought down. Kate sat in the crowded dining hall, her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. She scrolled through the messages of support, feeling both overwhelmed and relieved that people were finally seeing the truth. But the weight of what was coming next settled heavily in her chest. Emily hadn't responded publicly yet, but it was only a matter of time. Ethan sat across from her, leaning back in his chair, watching the chaos unfold around them. "We did it," he said, though there was a hint of caution in his voice. Kate nodded. "We got the word out. Now we wait." But waiting was the hardest part. Every time the doors to the dining hall opened, Kate tensed, expecting to see Emily storming in, ready for revenge. But Emily hadn't shown up all day, and the absence was as unsettling as anything she could have done. By late afternoon, the rumors started to shift. Whispers about Emily's family, about how they were pulling strings behind the scenes, trying to control the fallout. Some students claimed that Emily had gone home, that her parents were using their connections to make this all go away. Others said she had been spotted with her father, speaking with the dean in private. Kate and Ethan stayed glued to their phones, monitoring every new piece of information, but the truth remained murky. It was clear that Emily wasn't going down quietly, but the public nature of the exposure had made it harder for her to simply cover it up. It wasn't until the following morning that the real pushback came. Kate was on her way to class when her phone buzzed with an alert. She glanced down at the screen and froze. Emily Rogers releases statement. Her heart raced as she clicked on the link and read the headline. It was a carefully crafted statement released through her family's PR team. The message was clear. Emily was denying everything. She claimed the recording had been taken out of context, that Kate had manipulated it to make her look bad. Emily framed herself as the victim, saying she had been the target of a smear campaign designed to damage her reputation. Kate felt a sickening twist in her stomach. She knew this was coming. Emily's family wasn't going to let this go without a fight. But seeing the lies in print, watching the narrative twist in real time, made it feel all the more personal. Ethan called her seconds later, his voice sharp with anger. "Did you see it? She's trying to spin it, make it look like you're the one behind this." "I saw," Kate said, trying to keep her voice steady. "She's not going to get away with it." But as she hung up and continued walking across campus, she could already feel the shift. Some students who had supported her the day before were now hesitant, unsure of what to believe. The power of Emily's family and their influence was already starting to reshape the narrative. By the time Kate arrived at class, the tension was palpable. People whispered as she walked in, some avoiding her gaze entirely. Others, who had once rallied behind her, now seemed uncertain, their faith shaken by Emily's public statement. Kate took her seat, trying to focus on the lecture, but her mind was spinning. She had done everything right. She had exposed the truth, gathered evidence, and brought it to light. But Emily's ability to manipulate the situation was stronger than she had anticipated. And now, the very people who had been on her side were starting to question her. After class, Kate met Ethan at their usual spot in the campus cafe. He looked as frustrated as she felt. "This isn't right," Ethan said, slamming his hand down on the table. "She can't just lie her way out of this." "I know," Kate said quietly, staring into her cup of coffee. "But her family's pulling the strings now. They've got the money, the power. They can make people believe whatever they want." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "So what do we do? We can't just sit here and let her rewrite the whole story." Kate thought for a moment, her mind racing. They had played their biggest card, the recording, and Emily had still found a way to twist it. But there had to be more they could do. "We need to get more people to speak out," Kate said finally. "We need more voices, more stories. Emily's gone after a lot of people over the years. If we can get them to come forward, it won't matter what her family says. There'll be too much evidence to ignore." Ethan nodded, a determined look crossing his face. I'll start reaching out to people. There are a few I know who've wanted to speak up but were too afraid. Kate felt a renewed sense of purpose. Emily might have tried to twist the narrative, but the truth was still on their side. And now, it wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been hurt by Emily and her friends. The rest of the day was spent reaching out to students who had been targeted by Emily in the past. Slowly, names and stories started to come in. Some were small incidents, cruel comments in passing, public humiliation in front of peers. Others were more serious. Reports of bullying that had driven students to transfer schools, emotional scars that had lingered for years. By the end of the day, Kate and Ethan had compiled a list of over a dozen people willing to share their experiences. They arranged a meeting for that evening, in the common room of one of the dorms. It was time to unite their voices, to show the campus and the world that this wasn't just about one person's fight against Emily. It was about a pattern of cruelty that had been allowed to fester for far too long. As the meeting time approached, Kate felt her nerves rising again. She had no idea how many people would actually show up. Some might be too scared, others might have second thoughts. But when she arrived at the common room, she was shocked to see it was nearly full. Dozens of students were there, sitting in chairs, standing along the walls, all of them ready to share their stories. Some looked nervous, others angry, but they were all there for the same reason, to finally speak out. Kate stood at the front of the room, feeling a surge of emotion as she looked out at the crowd. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in this fight. She wasn't just one person standing up to Emily Rogers. She was part of something bigger. Ethan stood beside her, nodding in encouragement. "You got this." Kate took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous energy in the room. "I know it's not easy to speak out, but we're not alone in this. And together, we can make sure that people finally see the truth." As the meeting went on, one by one, the students shared their stories. Some spoke through tears, others with barely contained anger. But as each person spoke, it became clearer and clearer that Emily's power was rooted in fear and silence. And now, that silence was being broken. By the time the last student had spoken, the mood in the room had shifted. What had started as a group of individuals telling their stories had transformed into a movement. They weren't just victims anymore. They were a force, united by a shared determination to take Emily down once and for all. As the meeting came to a close, Kate felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. Emily might have tried to spin the narrative, but the truth was too strong, too undeniable. This fight wasn't over yet, but now, Kate knew they had the power to win. The next morning, everything changed. Kate woke to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. Groggy, she reached for it and saw dozens of notifications, texts, emails, social media alerts. Her heart raced as she unlocked her phone, scanning the messages, her pulse quickening with every word. Emily Rogers expelled. Hillcrest University takes action after public outcry. Kate sat up in bed, hardly able to believe it. She quickly opened the news articles, her eyes widening as she read. Overnight, the administration had announced that Emily Rogers was being expelled from Hillcrest University, effective immediately. The decision had come after an overwhelming number of testimonies from students detailing years of bullying and harassment. The school had finally been forced to act. A surge of emotion hit Kate. Relief, disbelief, and a sense of victory so profound that she had to sit for a moment just to let it sink in. Emily was gone. After all the lies, the threats, and the manipulation, she had finally been held accountable. Kate's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan calling. "Did you see the news?" Ethan's voice was breathless with excitement. "I saw," Kate said, still in a bit of shock. "I can't believe it. They actually expelled her." "I know. This is huge, Kate. We did it." Kate smiled, a genuine, unrestrained smile. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight that had been pressing down on her was gone. "Meet me at the cafe?" Ethan asked. "We need to celebrate." "I'll be there in 10, Kate said, already getting out of bed. As she got ready, her thoughts raced. It felt surreal. After everything she had been through, Emily Rogers was finally out of her life. But more than that, Kate knew this was bigger than just her. Emily's expulsion was a message to everyone who had been hurt by her. For the students who had suffered in silence, who had been too afraid to speak up, it was proof that change was possible. By the time Kate arrived at the cafe, the campus was buzzing with the news. Students crowded around tables, sharing articles and discussing the fallout. Some were in disbelief, others were celebrating openly, but the mood was undeniably one of shock. Emily Rogers, the untouchable queen of Hillcrest, had finally been dethroned. Ethan waved her over from a corner table, grinning from ear to ear. As soon as she sat down, he pushed a coffee in front of her. "I don't even know where to start," Ethan said, still riding the high of victory. "I just can't believe it actually happened." Kate took a sip of her coffee, the warmth grounding her. "Neither can I. I thought her family would find a way to protect her." "They probably tried," Ethan said. "But once all those stories came out, there was no way the school could ignore it." Kate nodded. The flood of testimonies had been more powerful than she ever imagined. Dozens of students had come forward, sharing their stories on social media, in student groups, even directly with the administration. The pressure had been too much, and the university had been forced to take action. Ethan leaned in, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "You know, this isn't just about Emily anymore. What we did, it changed things. People are going to feel safer speaking up now." Kate met his gaze, understanding the full weight of his words. "I hope so. No one should have to go through what we did." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the reality of their victory sinking in. It wasn't just that they had taken down Emily. It was that they had changed the culture at Hillcrest. The silence that had protected people like Emily for so long had been shattered. Just as Kate was about to say something, her phone buzzed again. She glanced down, her heart skipping a beat when she saw who it was. A message from Dean Harrison. "Kate, I would like to meet with you and Ethan to discuss the recent events and the steps Hillcrest is taking to ensure the safety of all students. Please stop by my office at your earliest convenience." Kate showed Ethan the message, and he raised his eyebrows. "Guess they want to do damage control?" "Looks like it," Kate said. "But maybe it's more than that." They decided to head to Dean Harrison's office that afternoon. When they arrived, the atmosphere in the administration building was noticeably different. The staff seemed tense, no doubt reeling from the intense scrutiny the university was under after the public outcry. Kate and Ethan were ushered into Dean Harrison's office quickly, where the dean greeted them with a serious but calm expression. "Thank you both for coming," Dean Harrison said, gesturing for them to sit. Kate and Ethan sat down, waiting as Dean Harrison folded her hands on the desk. "I want to start by acknowledging the courage it took for you both to come forward," Dean Harrison began. "The testimonies from students across campus were deeply troubling, and it's clear that Hillcrest failed to address these issues sooner." Kate exchanged a glance with Ethan, both of them surprised by the dean's candid admission. "We have taken the appropriate action in expelling Emily Rogers," Dean Harrison continued. "But this incident has revealed larger systemic issues within the university. We need to do better. As part of that effort, we are establishing a task force dedicated to preventing bullying and harassment on campus. I would like to invite both of you to be a part of it." Kate felt a rush of surprise. She hadn't expected this, an invitation to be part of something that could create real change. For a moment, she was speechless, trying to process the offer. I'm honored," Kate said finally. "I want to help. I don't want anyone else to go through what we did." Ethan nodded in agreement. "We're in. Whatever it takes." Dean Harrison smiled, though it was a smile tinged with the weight of responsibility. "Thank you. Your experiences will be invaluable in helping us create a safer environment for all students. I'll be in touch with more details soon." As they left the office, Kate felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. This was more than just a victory over Emily. It was the start of something bigger, something that could change Hillcrest for good. As they walked back across campus, Ethan bumped her shoulder playfully. "You realize we're kind of heroes now, right?" Kate laughed, the sound light and free. "I don't know about heroes, but we did something important." "Yeah, we did," Ethan said, smiling. "And this is just the beginning." Kate looked around the campus, at the students walking by, at the familiar buildings that had once felt so hostile. For the first time since she had arrived at Hillcrest, she felt like she truly belonged. Not because she had won some battle, but because she had helped create a place where people like her could stand up and be heard. As the sun set over the university, casting long shadows across the quad, Kate felt a quiet sense of peace. The fight was over, but the work had just begun. And this time, she knew they weren't alone. We hope you were moved and inspired by our story. We want to hear your opinion. Leave a comment below, share your impressions, and your own stories of resilience and hope. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next emotional videos. Join us on this journey and follow more incredible stories. See you next time.